Okay, so today we're going to talk about civil rights. The first thing I want to do, because the next lecture is going to be about civil liberties, is that I want to start off by differentiating between civil rights and civil liberties. When we're talking about civil liberties, and we'll get into this more in the next lecture, when we're talking about civil liberties, we're talking about limitations that are placed on the government to protect us. That we have certain rights, they're referred to as inalienable rights. Rights that we have by virtue of being human beings, or the way the framers would have put it, rights that God gave us. And that the government can't limit. And so those are our civil liberties. Civil liberties are all about protecting us from the government, right? Civil rights has to do with equality of rights for all people, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, age, or sexual preference. And even now, we're in a debate. There's an ongoing debate, hopefully you guys have heard about in the news, having to do with what some are calling a civil rights issue. Which one? What am I talking about?
Same-sex marriage.
Same-sex marriage.
Yep.
Right? There's a debate over whether or not that should be extended to all citizens, or whether marriage should be limited to certain groups of people and not others. And so these kinds of issues of where civil rights starts and stops, which groups need to be protected, who is and isn't being treated equally, is something that's constantly going to be negotiated. Now, we're going to spend most of our time talking about African Americans because we have a unique relationship with African Americans in the United States, in large part because they were brought over here as machines, you know, as slaves to work on land. And so that we've had a long history of sort of gradually moving from slavery to where we are now today. So we're going to spend most of our time talking about that. Oh, wrong one. So after the Civil War, there were 3 amendments that were passed that were referred to as the Civil War Amendments. The 13th Amendment prohibited slavery. The 14th Amendment said, and this winds up being very important, no state shall deprive citizens of their rights under the Constitution. No state shall deprive citizens of their rights under the Constitution. This is going to become very important when we talk about civil liberties, because eventually the courts interpreted that to mean that if you have a right because you're a citizen of the United States, a state can't limit that right. If you have freedom of speech because you're a citizen of the United States, a state can't limit that. And we'll talk about that more in the next lecture. But the key to the 14th Amendment is the Equal Protection Clause. And basically what the Equal Protection Clause says is that the laws have to be applied to all people equally. Everybody has to be treated equally. And then the last of the Civil War amendments was the 15th Amendment, which guaranteed the right of male citizens to vote. I do think it's interesting, and for the women in the class, to be mindful of the fact, or all of us, I suppose, that slaves were freed and black men were allowed to vote. Women wouldn't get the right to vote for another 40 years. Like that gives you sort of a position, like an idea of where everybody was valued in terms of their input into our democratic system. Now, prior to the 1950s, the Supreme Court played a huge role in sort of the civil rights movement, as it were. Before the 1950s, the Supreme Court basically impeded any progress towards equality. They made it harder to go towards equality. The reason why is that what the courts had ruled over and over again that civil rights laws only apply to official acts of state governments. By the way, when I say state governments, I'm also referring to the federal government as well. That private citizens, the court said, were free to go ahead and discriminate privately. So if you went to a restaurant, if you owned a restaurant, you could go ahead and hang a sign out that said no blacks allowed. That was not a problem. The government couldn't do that. The government couldn't say no blacks allowed. Not that they would own a restaurant, but they couldn't do that. But private individuals could. So I know that probably everybody's like, that probably thinks like that's barbaric. let me ask you a question. Should a restaurant owner be able to hang a sign out that says no blacks or no Jews or no whatever?
I would say no, because anything that a person may do, whether it's a private business or a government business, if it hurts the public, it shouldn't be done.
If it's that person's private property, their own private property, they worked for it, they bought it, they set up the establishment, why shouldn't they be able to go ahead and say, I choose to run my business this way? I should be free to go ahead and decide who I want to have in my place of business and who I'm not.
Because if it impedes on the rights of other citizens, wouldn't that be problematic?
Do I have a right? Do we have a right to go to a particular restaurant? Do I have a right to go to Denny's? Do I? Find that in the Constitution. The right to go to Denny's. It's right there. Right, an amendment. We'll add that to the Constitution. What do you think? Go ahead.
I mean, although it's wrong, I think that they should be able to do that, because people say, like, not making them sound out to be like this, but people say no dogs allowed or no people on my property or something. I think that, I mean, it's their private property, it's their business, as long as,
Okay.
like you said.
Let me ask you guys a question. Suppose you were getting ready to go into a restaurant. You'd heard great things about this restaurant. Fabulous things. Good food, low prices, fast service. Like, damn, that's everything. And you go in there, and as you walk in, you see a sign that says, no Mexicans, or no blacks, or no Jews. Do you go in?
No.
I gotta know.
I would. I don't fall into any of those categories. I'm good.
So you seriously? No, that's a fair answer. Seriously? Would you go in?
I'm like,
Good food.
Good price. It is tempting. I don't fall into any of those categories. I might give it a shot.
Whoa. Okay, that's cool. Anybody else? Luke, when you go in? Depends. Jake?
It depends on how good the food is, what the food is.
Probably once.
Really?
So food's that
Probably once.
Probably once, just to find out what it was all about.
How the service is, if the service is good. You know, it depends on a lot of things.
That's interesting.
Or maybe just if I wanted to get an inside view of it, just in case.
Okay. Albert, you go up to a restaurant. It says no Jews. I'm assuming you're not Jewish.
No, I'm not.
Okay, cool. No Jews. You go in?
Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
It's kind of like think of it this way. If some restaurants you're not allowed to smoke in there, and some restaurants you're allowed to smoke, would you still go in?
Okay. Michael?
Smoking, race identification, kind of not on the same plane.
That's true.
Civil rights.
What'd you say?
Well, in certain ways, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I would suggest to you that like in California, if you had I should ask it differently. I'll say Albert. Okay, I'll go back to you. You don't mind, right? Okay, the sign says no Jews, no blacks, and you've heard good things about the restaurant. You say you go in, right? You're getting ready to go in, but you see some people that you know, some friends. Do you still go in?
In the restaurant.
No, they're on the street, but they can see you getting ready to go in.
I don't think my friends would really care. They'd probably be trying to eat with me.
So you don't have any black or Jewish friends, apparently.
I do.
Okay.
Not my main friend.
I was standing on the street corner. You guys know I'm Jewish, right? I'm standing over there. I see you. You're getting ready to walk into the no Jews restaurant. You still go?
Okay, now I'm gonna go.
Okay. Because after your grade is already final. Right. Now you're like, I got a C. There we go. Once again, I have to edit this thing. Okay, go ahead,
I
Nick.
actually would still go in, but I would go across the street, ask you what you want, go in the restaurant, I'll buy food for both of us and just take it out.
Just so you know, I wouldn't go into I'm not saying that you guys are wrong. I wouldn't go into an establishment like that. Craig, you go ahead and you're getting ready to go to a restaurant. You walk in, you hear the great things. It says no whites allowed.
I wouldn't go in. I have a firm belief that anything that hurts society, I don't participate in.
Okay,
And I think that's part of it.
interesting. Go ahead, Jay.
Also, you can't always tell who's Jewish. You can't always tell. I've actually known.
That's true.
I've known some African Americans that looked white. They were completely
Right.
white.
No, true.
So you can't always tell who's black, who's Jewish, who's Mexican. So
Right.
what's to stop those people from going to this place that says?
Well, I suspect establishments like that wouldn't care if they couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Right. The Jews that don't look like Jews are okay. Blacks that don't look like. Because I would suggest to you that what would happen is, in reality, I suggest that what would happen if there was a restaurant in Los Angeles that had that said no Jews, no blacks, no Mexicans, something like that, that place would have a lot of difficulty functioning. One, because there'd be protests outside. Two, because a lot of people would boycott it. It would be a big thing. And so the argument that some people make, is very similar to what the court said before, is let the free market decide. If somebody wants to be able to exclude people from their restaurant or their business establishment, they should be able to do that and let the market essentially decide whether or not that business is going to survive. I think it's an interesting argument. I'm not saying, I don't want you to think that I'm embracing that argument, but I do think it's worthwhile when we think about our freedoms and our liberties and our rights to go ahead and sort of consider these ideas.